Torah is just a long string of numbers. Some say that it's a code sent to us from God.
That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's just good stuff. Check this out, okay? The word for the Garden of Eden, Kedem. Numerical translation, 144. Now the value of tree of knowledge, all right, in the garden, right? Eitz HaChaim, 233. 144, 233. And you can take those numbers. So
like the Fibonacci sequence?
Fibonacci.
Fibonacci is an Italian mathematician in the 13th century. If you divide 144 into 233, the result approaches theta.
Theta?
Theta. The Greek symbol for golden ratio, golden spiral.
Wow. I never saw that before. That's like that series you find in nature? Like the face of a sunflower?
Wherever the spirals.
You see this math everywhere.
Welcome back to the Gnostic Informant, and you are about to attain true gnosis. Joining me today, Dr. Robert M. Price, the infamous, the evil and wicked. No, I'm just kidding. Dr. Robert M. Price. A lot of people do think that, but it's okay. And that just means you're doing something right.
Right.
You can't be true to yourself without pissing some people off in this world. You're not gonna please everybody. Someone's gonna get mad about your ideas, and that's just the way it is. Mm-hmm. So, listen, we want to talk about Christianity, the Christ figure in the New Testament, where it all comes from. How does this idea that you get from because this idea of messianic prophecy in the Old Testament, right? The Old Testament, Hebrew Bible, Septuagint, Tanakh, whatever you want to call it, Torah. It's kind of a weird subject because a lot of these messianic prophecies they don't even mention the word Messiah. Like a lot of these stuffs don't even talk about the Messiah will do this. It's like very vague. Like in Isaiah, you get like the suffering servant. And then like that gets applied to Jesus at a later time. But it doesn't sound like whoever wrote Isaiah was even thinking about a Messiah. They're thinking about Israel being sacked by Assyria and Babylon, and then the servant is Jacob. And this servant of Jacob is Israel kind of being as like personification type thing. And the only time you do get the mention of a Messiah in the Hebrew Bible is with King David, who's called him the Anointed One. And he's just a king. He's not a god or anything. He's not the son of God. He's just the king. And then you have another figure named King Cyrus, who's not even Jewish, and he's called the Messiah, the Lord's Anointed One. And then you have other figures like in Zechariah, where Zechariah and Haggai right before Zechariah, where these prophets are basically saying that Zerubbabel is this signet ring that God's going to use to build the next temple. So doesn't call him a Messiah, but it kind of gives him there's a messianic tone going on there. Mm-hmm. And then the high priests, and then Joshua, and then they're like, what are we linking those together and putting those on the Jesus? Maybe. But then you get in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and then you get the teacher of righteousness, and you get all these other concepts that all kind of get like lumped in together of Messiah. The triumphant Messiah, the suffering Messiah. This verse means this verse means that. But all these things sort of play out, and depending on what century you're in, people would have read these things differently. It's not like there's one idea of the Messiah from 500 BC all the way until the Christianity. It's just kind of like a developing idea. And so I think I brought some stuff here. I think that the Messiah, this idea of a Messiah in Greek context, changes because of Platonism. So I'm going to explain what I mean by that. And I want to get your thoughts on it. And we'll occasionally throw up some super chats as well. Real quick, Constellation Pegasus says, ex-Jehovah's Kim and Mikey went over the impossible timeline of Luke's census when Jesus was supposed to be born. Interesting how the Bible fails historically. Good point.
Yeah.
Jesus' myth corresponds to the Soma and Kundalini going down and up and down the spine. Also, Soma is Dionysus. Well said. Well said. This all ties into what I'm about to get into, because once the Greek context hits, for example, let me show you what I mean real quick. When you start to talk about in Philo of Alexandria, who lived from 20 BC up until 50 AD, around there, you saw 70 years you lived for. You digging through Philo, you constantly find this idea of this logos, word of God, who's also the Son of God. And so this is a Jewish writer, pre-Christianity, but he's also a Middle Platonist. And I often say to people, Philo is a Platonist before he's a Jew. He seems like he's more loyal and faithful to Platonism than he is to Judaism. For example, let me just explain. Let me just like demonstrate that for you right now. In Confusion of Tongues, which I've talked about this a million times on my channel. I've debated mythicists on this. Is this literally Jesus, or is this some other angelic being and Jesus is a different character? Whatever. That's a whole other topic. But we all agree that the Christ in Paul's epistles and in the Gospels is heavily drawing from Philo. Philo says the Father of the universe has caused him, the Logos, to spring up as the eldest son, whom in another passage he calls the firstborn. And he who is thus born, imitating the ways of his father, has formed such and such species, looking to his archetypal patterns. And in another passage in the same book, he says the Logos of God is above all the world and is the most ancient and the most universal of all things that are created. And he is the image of God and the eldest of all the intellectual beings. On creation, he writes, but the image of God is the Logos by which the whole universe was created. On who is the heir of divine things, he writes, for the Logos is the image of God by which the whole world was created. He basically repeats that. And you see this in Colossians 1:15. I'm going to continue. And on Dreams, another book by Philo, he says the Logos of God is the bond of everything. And by the way, that word Logos is the word which we find in John 1, which I'll get to in a second. The Logos of God is the bond of everything, holding all things together and binding all parts and preventing them from being dissolved and separated. And even if there be not as yet anyone worthy to be called a son of God, let him labor earnestly to be adorned according to his firstborn Logos, the eldest of his angels, as the great archangel of many names, for he is called the authority, the name of God, the Logos, the man after his image, and he that sees Israel. Like, okay, that is very Christian right there. On Dreams, once again, he says, for nothing mortal can be made in the likeness of the Most High God himself, but only after the pattern of the second God. Isn't that interesting? He calls it a second God, deuteros theos. He literally uses that word, deuteros, second, theos, God, who is his Logos, his word. Finally, and another passage on agriculture, the shepherd and king of the flock is the Logos, the divine word. For it is fitting that the rational soul should be governed by reason, the divine Logos being the ruler and governor of all things. So this Logos, firstborn son of God, image of God, high priest, mediator, second God, the word of God, all that's there. Now, this is found in paganism. So totally side by side at the same time, you see the same trends in Middle Platonism that aren't Jewish, because Philo's a Middle Platonist, but he's Jewish. He's following this pagan trend that we find in other pagan sources, like Julian, for example, who says that the ineffable first principle, the one first God, and then there's a second God who they call the demiurge and logos. And in the hymn to King Helios, he says, there are, as the divine Plato teaches, 3 orders of gods. The first, beyond essence, who is the cause of all being. The second, who is the demiurge and father of all things. The third, the visible God. Of these, highest and middle, the intelligible and intellectual, is Helios, who proceeds from the ineffable one. So you notice how you get this first and second God, this logos and creator. He also says in hymn to the mother of the gods, the one is ineffable, beyond being. The second is the ruler and creator, demiurge, of the whole, whom some call Zeus, others call Helios. Now, the Gnostics do this differently. The Gnostics flip it on their head that the demiurge is the creator, and then the second God is the one that is the good one. But it depends on what Gnostic we're reading. So let's not even get into that yet. Now, this all comes from Plato. Plato's Timaeus, going all the way back to the 5th century BCE, is where we find all of this. It's not from the Old Testament. It's not from Judaism. There is no Trinity in the Old Testament. I've been telling people this. I'm waiting for any Orthodox Catholic to debate me on this. I don't know why they don't want to do it. Well, I know why they want to do it. There's no evidence. There's no Trinity in the Old Testament. But here in Plato, you get the demiurge, the craftsman God, the divine intellect who orders the cosmos. Plato says he was good, and the good could never have any jealousy of anything. And being free from jealousy, he desired that all things should come as near as possible to being like himself. Then he describes a second being called the world soul. He made a single visible living being containing within himself all living beings of the same natural order. This one visible living being he made in the likeness of that one intelligible living being, which includes all intelligible beings within itself. This idea of daimons and messengers, whatever you want to call it, intermediary beings, terrestrial, celestial, all that stuff. So you find this in Gnosticism, the nous, the aletheia, which means mind and truth, logos and zoe, word and life, anthropos and ecclesia. And why do I bring this up? This is the last thing I want to present before I get your thoughts on all this. Because in John 1, John 1 is basically telling you Christianity is Platonist. Why? Because it starts off and says, "Enarche etologos, kaiologos etoparatoteo." This is a modern Greek. I got to switch this up. I can't. Why is there modern Greek in here? This is annoying. Here we go. Big Greek's New Testament. There we go. NRK, and that's better. NRK and ologos, kai hologos and prostontheon, kai theos and ologos. In the beginning was this logos, and the logos was with God. That's Plato. That's Philo. It's right there. And then here's the kicker. This is where the Trinity comes from, because he says in verse 4, and toi zoe and kai e zoe and to phos ton anthropon. In him was Zoe. We translate it as life, because that's what the word means. In him was Zoe. That's the third figure of the one in the dyad that we find in Pythagoreanism and Platonism. It can't get any more clear than that. It's right there. That's where the Trinity comes from. That's where the second God, Jesus, comes from. It's right there in John. John is the most Platonist Bible you're going to get. And just real quick, just to go back to what I was saying about this is why I think these Gnostics are actually reflecting an earlier theology, not a later theology, because you see it right there, logos and Zoe in Valentinus's dyad, the one in the dyad. They already had a Trinity in the Valentinian Christianity way before the Nicene Trinity. Now, it was different. It wasn't they're all equal. It was one God, two God, three gods. It was a real triad like you find in the Trimurti, for example. Mm-hmm. Anyways, I just threw a lot at you because I want to get your thoughts on the development of Christianity, the Christ figure, the evidence for Jesus, everything you just heard. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's more understandable. I mean, it's less puzzling as a historical phenomenon in light of the work of the late, great Russell Gmirkin, who pointed out, well, he didn't put it this way, but that when Philo said Plato got everything he wrote from Moses, he knew how to allegorically interpret the scriptures, and that's what it was really telling us. That's just the opposite, right? Because as Gmirkin shows that the law, the creation account, and major building blocks of Old Testament religion seem to come right out of the pages of Plato and some Stoics and so forth. And so, and then when you compare the well-known Greek myths that have striking parallels to biblical myths, like Jephthah promising to sacrifice the first thing he lays eyes on when he gets back from the victory over the Ammonites or whoever they were. And it turns out it's his daughter, and so he has to sacrifice her. Just like Agamemnon having to mollify Athena to give them a good wind so the fleet can sail to conquer Troy, he has to sacrifice his daughter, Iphigenia. That's pretty darn close. And the Prometheus story is really retold as the story of the serpent in Eden. And there's so many other things like Samson and Hercules, both literary mythic incarnations of the sun. And to the point where some scholars think that actually it's that they were understood as two names for the same guy in the ancient world, in which case they couldn't have made this fun sword and sandal flick where Hercules meets Samson and they fight it out like it's Thor and Hercules in a Marvel comic. But there's so much Greek stuff, parallels. The near sacrifice of Isaac. It's just like
Iphigenia.
and that too.
That they both have that. They both have that comparison. I think Iphigenia is more on the nose, but you're right. The Phrixus one too. Because the Iphigenia one, he literally takes his daughter up on a mountain, pulls out a knife, is about to sacrifice her, and then a messenger of Artemis comes and transports her away and puts a deer in her stead. It's exactly the same story, except instead of a deer, you have a ram stuck in a thicket, and instead of a daughter, it's a son. But like it's the same story, like it's like complete mimesis all day.
Yeah, actually, was that Livy's version of it?
No, that's from the it's from one of the Greek retellings of Homer. I'll think of it in a second. But yeah, it's one of the variations of Homer.
You cut it, it's parallel, and it shouldn't be that big a surprise given the small neighborhood of the Eastern Mediterranean where these civilizations coexisted, and had trade relations and so forth. How do you think these things spread and just take on different names and so forth? It shouldn't be that much of a shock. And the only reason it is to anybody anymore is people have this either conscious or residual belief in the uniqueness of the Bible. That it's not good views, it's good news. And so there's this, even though they have no more reason for it, many critical scholars just have this, what's the word? Well, a kind of a tendency, like a grocery cart with bent wheels so that it always tends in one direction. They can't help thinking that, well, no, though there must have been some hermetic seal, no pun intended, between biblical and even if you admit it's myth, they're reluctant to say that it's borrowed from or simply another version of neighboring civilizations' myths. And once you drop that, you see what Gamirkin sees and others, that it's so similar. And this is so there's sort of a point to what Philo said, that you can kind of see Platonism in the Bible. It's like in another slightly different conceptual language, but there's no surprise. It's not like finding Confucianism in the Bible or something. And so that kind of makes it less alien sounding, so that when you get to Philo and say, darn, if this doesn't sound like Colossians, and especially the Gospel of John and later Jewish Kabbalah, boy, what a coincidence. No, it's not a coincidence. It's this broad, sometimes underground survival of views eventually deemed unorthodox by the religious institutions of the day, which again wanted to highlight their supposed uniqueness. Because if it's that much, like Paul Tillich says this in his essay, What is Religion? No religious advocate wants to admit that his or her religion is just one of a group. No. Ours is unique. And so you have all these silly things like the theological bumper sticker I've seen all my life. Christianity is not a religion, it's a relation. In fact, Wilford Cantwell Smith compiled a whole list of such sayings from members of all different world religions. Oh yeah, there are plenty of religions out there, but ours really doesn't belong because it's uniquely true. But once you drop that, you've got to say, they say, why does Philo never mention Jesus if there was a Jesus? Well, in a sense, he does, because it's the same sort of thing that crazy tinfoil hat wearing mythicists like me think happened. That it came together from many popular myths. And not stupid ones. I mean, it's not like idiotic folklore. It's like
the fact that Philo will mention people, he'll mention governors of Judea, he'll mention Syrian governors. He knows the politics. He knows what's happening in Jerusalem. He's writing about Jerusalem and the matters that are happening over there. The Essenes. He talks about the Essenes. He knows what's happening in there. The fact that he lives till 50 AD and never mentions Jesus, but he's writing about the Logos, Son of God, and the Divine Son, and all this crazy. That tells me that this did not, that the miracles of Jesus did not happen.
Yeah,
because he would be the first person to be beyond that shit. He's
Of
looking
course,
for it.
Yes,
He's looking for it. So it was written. The Gospels are written later. I do want to address this question before hopefully this person didn't leave yet, because this is the biggest misconception ever. Isn't Greek civilization younger than Genesis? And this is funny, because I don't even blame her for thinking this. This is kind of what we're taught. Like James Ussher's Annals of the World, for example. I don't know if you ever read this.
No.
It starts off, and Josephus's history is like this too. It starts off with Adam and Eve, and then Abraham, and then or Noah, and then Abraham, and then this, and then like halfway through the book, it finally gets into start Greeks and Romans and stuff. But it's not historical. Homer is found in the sources way before Genesis is ever mentioned. No one cites Genesis ever until after 300 BC. As I mentioned on my channel a million times, Hecataeus of Abdera, if the fragments are really not pseudo-Hecataeus, which a lot of people now think they're pseudo-Hecataeus, they might even be 2nd century, 1st century BC. But let's just grant that Hecataeus is Hecataeus, and he's writing about Abraham, and he's writing about Noah and Moses. That's 300 BC, 310, 290 in that area. That's the first time anyone talks about Genesis, is that 300 BC. Nobody mentions Genesis before that, not even in Jewish sources, Judean sources, Babylonian sources, Hittite sources, Egyptian sources, and we have hundreds of papyri from Judean communities that predate that from 500 BC, 400 BC. None of them talk about Genesis. So when I find Homer, we know from the record, from the historical record, Homer's talked about, Herodotus mentions Homer, Archilochus, all these sources from the 5th, 6th, and 7th century BCE. In the archaeology, for example, on pottery, we know there's a cup of Nestor that has a Homer line on it from 700 BC, citing Homer. Homer existed. So when I find the Iphigenia story and it looks like Isaac sacrificing his son, the evidence is saying that Homer was first and Genesis copied it, not the other way around, like everyone thinks.
Mhm.
Until someone can provide evidence that Genesis existed and it's not backdating itself. Because no, it's like, seriously, Moses was writing a history of the world and he knew about Adam and Eve and the serpent that talked to them, and like, come on, it's mythology. It's mythology. And then he records his own death too, because Genesis, at the end of Genesis, Moses died. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, you got to think about it. Someone later wrote this and they backdated it and they put it in the mouth of Moses. But it's a good question. I'm not even like laughing at the comment. It's a really good question, because we all assume Genesis must be the oldest book in the world. It's not. It's actually not that old. It's probably Hellenistic, maybe late Persian period.
Especially once you read Mirkan on that with Timaeus and the biblical account of creation, that really leaves no room for doubt. Plus the fact that you have alternative, great.
And he demonstrates that, number one, the Greeks are influencing are starting to influence people in that region even before the Hellenistic period. Before Alexander the Great, Greeks, you find Greek pottery in the Levant and Judea. They're trading with the Greeks. They're minting Greek coins, all that stuff. The Greeks are influencing Levantine people long before Homer and Hesiod and Archilochus and Pherecydes and the pre-Socratics. That's way before the Hellenistic period, centuries before 300 BC, that we have Greek civilization as like big players in the world of literature.
Well, looking at the other creation accounts in the Old Testament, you have various ones like the combat myth with Yahweh slaying Leviathan and Rahab and all of this, which you can compare very closely with ancient Mesopotamian accounts like the Enuma Elish and so forth, and then a bit more modestly, the priestly creation account of Genesis chapter 1, which, as Wellhausen pointed out long ago, sounds just like the kind of thing we have among the pre-Socratic Ionians. How did we get this diverse world from some single originary principle or element? Well, they had different versions, but gradually something churned the thing up, and it began to separate into light and darkness, wet and dry, this, that, and the other thing, all the animal species. So if you don't have a single version of it in Genesis, it shows you're dealing with a collection of different views, and that the Genesis 1 is not even particularly old. You would have to, I mean, you don't know this without a time machine, but you'd have to assume it fits in the intellectual history with the time of the pre-Socratics. And it's written down a good bit later than that. And ultimately, my guess is they're going by Bishop Ussher's belief that the world was created in 4004 BCE, because they're just taking the genealogies of Genesis literally as he did. And so Moses lived at a certain time, and Abraham did too. And so they basically taught rabbinic Judaism. So the Israelite religion is much older. It's non-critical. It's just biblicism and fundamentalist Bible quoting. It doesn't even deserve the dignity of being an alternate theory. It's just a kind of a dumb way of taking Genesis. And that is a big thing with me. When you point out stuff like this, that doesn't mean you're criticizing the Bible. It means you want to understand it correctly. So I always say I am the defender of the Bible. I'm not attacking it. I just want to understand it better and better, and it makes a lot more sense with the higher.
I think we respect the Bible more than people who believe in it do. I think we do. I do, at least.
Yes.
I have a lot of respect for the authors of the Bible.
If you want to have it as a basis of your religious life, more power to you. But that's not the only way to read the Bible. That's almost exploiting the Bible. Almost. But I think it's important to read it for its own sake and leave your beliefs to the side for the time being.
Yeah, that seems like be a hard thing for a lot of these scholars that come from divinity schools that are affiliated with the church. It's not
Yeah.
they just can't do that. They just have to be. They're arguing for their team. It seems like that's very
Yeah.
common. Not everyone's like that. Like Dale C. Ellison is really good at taking off his Christian hat and being a scholar. John Dominic Crossan is another one who can take off his Christian hat and become a scholar and be critical. So it's not. I'm not saying that they're all like that. I'm just saying it's just you can see it sometimes. You see these articles and these journals and oh god, here we go. Talking about Judas, the historical Judas again. Here we go. Our historical Mary Magdalene, all this stuff. Like whatever, man. Anyways, Solera Knight says if the New Testament is truly fiction, somebody went a lot of trouble to make it seem like a true story. Why? What do you think about that?
Well, since almost all the New Testament narratives in the Gospels and Acts look very much like Old Testament prototypes, just somewhat reshuffled, as various scholars have shown in amazing detail, like David L. Brody and many others. You really have to have an explanation for why does all this stuff look so much like the Bible, though creatively reshaped. If the one is just history and the other is not, or if they're both supposed to be history, you can't ignore that kind of thing. But faith for some people depends upon it, and they just have to think they have to approach it with a historical bias, a literalistic bias. And the people you mentioned who are doing their best to hold their faith in one hand and critical principles in the other wind up as what James Barr famously called maximal conservatives. They know enough about critical studies to see that it sheds a lot of light on the Bible, but there's a line past which they will not go. And so suspiciously, though they may juggle various theories like the huge introduction to the New Testament by Donald Guthrie, a vast, huge book that goes into all theories about the origins of each New Testament book with amazing comprehensiveness. You're not really surprised when, after discussing them, he comes out with a traditionalist theory of accuracy, date, and authorship. It's just they can't help but think that that's got to be the right way to view it. It's a kind of an well, I don't want to say inbred, that has nasty connotations, but a kind of embedded sort of bias toward it. It's like, as they say, every paradigm includes its own criteria for probability. Things will look convincing to you if they support the view you begin with. You can't help it. It's almost hypnotic. And so I never accuse people like Bart Ehrman, for example, of being dishonest and faking it or anything, but I just can't help thinking that his tutelage under Bruce Metzger, who was a pretty fundamentalist evangelical, though a great textual critic like Bart, he just can't help thinking of it that way, even though he no longer has a commitment of loyalty to the people that propagate it. I wonder if he'll wind up believing the conservative things he does believe about Jesus and the Bible. I suspect gradually he won't, but who knows? Like Michael Icona, this guy has suffered from real conservative evangelicals for being willing to grant that the Night of the Living Dead thing in Matthew 27 might be a legend. They said, what? You mean, boy, that you're putting down the historicity of the Bible? Just kidding. And what can they do? You can't blame them for not wanting to lose their livelihoods. So they cannot afford to take what I would consider a more objective look. But they probably have similar theories about me, and ultimately, who knows? I'm no mind reader. But you really have to ask yourself, why does this view look good to you? And that's something we're not really trained to do. You have to really try hard to do that.
Yeah. And I also think this is the nature of how a lot of these stories were in the ancient world. Like when you're writing the life of Alexander, the Alexander romance, it's history. It's drawing from historical data, but it's mostly legend. Most of that didn't happen. Alexander didn't fly up in the sky and meet a dragon. He didn't he didn't drink from the fountain of youth. He didn't do, that's all myth. But it's applied to real people in real time, which makes me think there could have been a real guy named Jesus. Like, Philo goes so close, but he doesn't actually say this angel's name is Jesus, which makes me go, okay, maybe there's a guy. Even if there was, though, none of this stuff that's written about him is reflective of any of the historical data. It just doesn't make sense. Almost none of it. Except for he might have got crucified.
Hero archetype.
Yes, it does.
And every point.
Yeah. And like that's another thing that I talked about you last time you were here, is that this book right here, Robert Turkin, Cults of the Roman Empire, where he talks about how the Attis cult in Rome had the Hilaria festival, where there's a mourning period, or actually he says it starts off with a Lent period where they don't eat certain foods for 15 days or something like that in early March. Then they get to March 15th. I think this is how it goes, March 20th or something like that. Anyways, the point is they end up going into a period of mourning. They bring out a pine tree. They attach a effigy of the god Attis onto the tree and bury it and mourn for 3 days. And then on that third day, they rejoice of the resurrection. And the priest comes out and says, rejoice, God has been saved. And through his sufferings, we are saved too. This was in late March, spring equinox. And it's happening. So you're telling me that Jesus went down to Passover during this same exact time period and completed the exact same thing that we find. And that is the reason why I point out Robert Turkin, because he says that this was instituted by Claudius in the 40s. So right at the same time, the Gospels are being like proto-gospel period between 30 AD and 70 AD. We're talking Rome is already doing this. What? That's more work needs to be done on this, is what I'm saying. I'm not saying we know for sure. Yeah.
Don't you have to ask yourself, why believe that the one parallel version is historically true and the other one, which is so much like it, is not? And then you begin to come up with these crazy ideas that Satan knew what was going to happen because he understood the biblical prophecies as referring to Jesus and his death and resurrection. And to throw people off the track, like these scholars, Satan caused people to invent these fake Jesuses beforehand. And people still say that today, despite the fact that the very logic of the argument seems that there were pre-Christian Jesus counterfeits created by the devil. Doesn't that have to mean that pagan versions are older? I mean, you can put any spin on Satan inspired it or aliens told him.
That's what Justin Martyr says. Justin Martyr uses that argument.
Yep.
Yeah,
and how could modern apologists say, oh, no, they all ripped it off from Christianity? That's impossible because of these admissions.
And the same people who say that, I've seen these podcasts where like they're interviewing Dan McClellan, and Dan McClellan goes, hey, they might have got it from the Christians. Really? The 5% of the Roman Empire is Christian. That's the data that we all know. We all know that when Constantine converted to Christianity, it was a big shock because only 5% of the empire, and it's all in the East too. There's barely Christians on the West, except for like the church in Rome and stuff like that. You're telling me that this little tiny population of weird Christians influenced Roman imperial cult rituals? What the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah.
Their brains fall out of their head when they start talking about the subject.
Yeah.
And they don't need any data to prove. They don't need any data to provide that. They just say it, and everyone just buys it. But when I point out that there's actual primary sources about Addis, they need tons of verification. Wait a minute, how do you know that Claudius instituted the same Hilaria? How do you know that one wasn't different? They need all this. You can bring as much evidence as possible. I can show them that Horus is born on December 20, or the winter solstice, and Harpocrates, or whatever his name is, Horus the child is what his name is, in Plutarch, which is early 2nd century. You could show them that source, and they go, well, it says winter solstice. It doesn't say December 25th. Yeah, I know it's the same day, but who knows? Who knows? Like, they don't accept evidence. But when they make crazy claims about Christians or pagans adopted from Christians, I don't need any evidence for that. I'll just straight up say it. Isn't that crazy though? The double standard.
Yeah, but the criterion for plausibility is, does this assertion comport with what I've always believed? It's circular, but they don't see it. Somehow they're blinded by the light, you might say.
Yeah,
I love this anecdote. I wish I could think of the author's name, but this scholar, anthropologist, I guess, was researching a book about survivals of rural paganism in modern rural areas in Europe. And his travels took him to some small rural village in Greece, and it was a passion play on Good Friday. And they had a guy dressed up as Jesus, and they somehow staged some kind of mock crucifixion. And so he's lying down on a stretcher, and they put him into a hole in the wall, just like the Attis thing you mentioned. Only this is a living man. And standing next to the observer is this little old lady who starts hysterically weeping. And the scholar says to her, "Ma'am, what's wrong? Can I help?" And she says, "If Jesus doesn't rise on Sunday, we'll have no crops this year." Yeah. Oh my gosh. Somehow, I mean, that's very eloquent. She doesn't need James Frazier or any of these guys. She can tell what this means. Oh, have you ever seen the movie The Eye of the Devil? It was from the early 60s. David Niven is in it. Donald Pleasance, Sharon Tate, her first movie, Deborah Carr. It's a black and white movie made in England about this nobleman who is the lord of an estate with in the wine country of Burgundy. He lives in England and is alerted that he has to come back home now because the crops are failing. Well, what's he supposed to do about it? And it winds up that he is the God King, and that he has to shed his blood to fertilize the ground and save the crops. It is terrific.
Oh wow, it's like some straight from James Frazier. Like,
yeah, you got to see this. It's an excellent movie, and it's really thought-provoking. It's kind of like The Wicker Man, only in some ways better.
Yeah, that sounds fascinating. I'm actually going to pull up some of the Addis sources, the Hilaria. I talk about it a lot, but I don't think people hear about it enough. I think this needs to be, and this needs to be researched more. We need to find out, is it, like, the question remains, did the Hilaria festival predate the gospel or not? The primary sources say it says it did. The only question is it the same Hilaria that we find in 4th century sources that we find in 2nd century sources? That's the question. And I think there's enough data to come to some sort of conclusion. I mean, Robert Turkin went so deep on this. He's talking about statues in the 2nd century that suggest that they were doing this festival already in the 2nd century. Marcus Aurelius added a day to the feast festival. Antoninus also did. Commodus talks about it in one of his sources. So the 2nd century seems to be, this was in full swing. Now, the question is it the same exact 3-day mourning and resurrection as we get in the later 4th century sources, which are more explicit about this. That's the question. But there is no doubt that there is a strong possibility that the Gospels could be drawing from the Roman imperial cult's resurrection festival at the spring equinox, which then throws the entire question about Jesus' historicity out the window. Because one of the only things that scholars agree on about the historicity of Jesus is there was a guy who went to Jerusalem during Passover and got crucified. But that's the timing of that suggests, how do we know this? How do we know that this isn't part of the myth? The timing, the spring equinox, the Passover. Yes. You know what I mean? It's just like I don't know why that's accepted as historical fact. I think that's one of the things that need to be questioned.
If Passover had its own origin with a different rationale, and it was changed at least once, because you can even tell in Exodus that they're already celebrating a feast of firstlings, and they already have matzah and so on. And it's just, and Pharaoh won't let them go out of the country to celebrate it because it's offensive to Egyptians. So they've reinterpreted it, admittedly, in Exodus to make it a historical festival, not a nature festival. And so if you think that is historical, then you can say, well, Passover happens is a commemoration of that, and that was in the spring of the year, given what the holidays were originally about. So it's not that odd to think of Jesus, a Jew, going to celebrate Passover in the spring. However, that's one, though there's a huge problem with that, because the idea of Jesus celebrating Passover at all is very strange, since the Gospels don't make it look like a Passover feast. Luke injects into the Matthew-Mark narrative that, yes, they're gathered for a Passover Seder, but it's the context in Matthew and Mark that, where are we going to celebrate the Passover? But once you get to the scene, there's no sign of it being a Seder, no lamb, no bitter herbs, etc. And instead, you've got, this bread is my body, this wine is my blood. Tell me what that has to do with Passover, or how is possible in Judaism at all. That's an ultimate abomination. Well, it makes loads of sense if it comes from the rites of Dionysus and Osiris, who were gods of the same god, really, of grain and grapes. I mean, that makes perfect sense, and it just shows you that this was not really anything to do with Exodus. It has to do with mystery religions and fertility gods. But you're not going to hear that in these debates. That just doesn't occur to them.
Yeah. Okay. So before we go on the next super, I just want to pull something up real quick. Thank you for that super chat, Solaire. I just want people to see this. For whoever hasn't seen this yet, needs to see this. So this is from Robert Turkin's book, same book that I'm just talking about right here. Let me just pull this down. Robert Turkin, Cults of the Roman Empire. You got to read this. This is what he says. Imperial Phrygianism. It's the chapter. It's one of the first chapters of the book. He talks about this great mother Attis festival in Rome, and he says, if you keep going down, at all events, it was apparently Claudius who instituted and had inscribed in the Roman calendar a ceremony which, after a fashion, opened the holy week of the god Attis, the entry of the tree. On March 22nd, a brotherhood of woodcutters, Dendrophori, carried in procession in the Palatine Temple a pine tree felled in the memory of a tree at whose foot Attis had destroyed his virility. I'm just going to keep skipping ahead a little bit. March 15th, the brotherhood of the Canaphori went in procession through the streets. There was a 9-day penitence, next paragraph, a sort of Lent. People abstained from bread, pomegranates, quinces, pork, fish, probably wine as well. Only milk was drunk. Then it says on March 22nd, the pine had been cut, and the ram was sacrificed. By the way, a lamb is a baby ram.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting. It's the same animal. It's just not a baby. So it's the same animal. A ram is sacrificed. It's blood. By the way, you know what's crazy about this? When Philo talks about the Passover, you know what word he uses? He uses the word for ram, krios, I think it is. He doesn't use the word for lamb.
Wow.
He says Philo calls it a Passover ram. And then here you have in this source, they sacrifice a ram on March 22nd. Its blood bathing the roots of the tree. The felling, ektome in Greek, took place in the woods sacred to Cybele. Procession, Pompey, went through Rome. Then it says on March 23rd, Salii priests went in procession, sounding their trumpets. They're mourning. I skipped. I didn't cut that part. Got cut off. But they're mourning now. They're in a state of mourning, and between these 22nd, 23rd, 24th, this is what they're doing. The Day of Blood marked the peak of the mournful cycle. See how they're mourning, right? Attis is dead right now. Mourning. Then the high priest with his galley gave the signal for a wild dance at the sacred pine. He flagellated himself with a whip, knuckle bones. It reminds me of Jesus getting whipped on the cross. Are you serious? This is the passion right here. He's getting whipped with a knuckle bone, flagellated himself with a whip. The sound of curving clarinets and cymbals, the timbrels were beaten furiously. People beat their naked breasts with pine cones. All right, and I'm going to skip ahead. After the cutting of the tree, on the third day, the holy and ineffable harvest of Gallus was cut. The Emperor Julian would write, the pine tree, festooned the strips of cloth and flowers, was then buried, and Cybele had done with the corpse of Attis. On that day, the high priest had prayers said for the protection of the emperor and the empire. Tertullian made jeer at this respectable Archigellus, who 8 days after the death of Marcus Aurelius made libations of impure blood by ripping open his arms. So, you know, Tertullian is talking crap about it. Anyways, last one says, the funeral ceremonies of the pine Attis were probably followed in a kind of vigil, which, distinct from midnight, celebrated on December 9th, 160, in Lyon, for the consecration of the Archigallus. We do not know what the liturgy consisted of. A page from Firmicus Paternus, this is that 4th century source I was telling you about, that explicitly gives us these way more detailed inscription. It says, prayers and lamentations chanted rhythmically in the shadows, light shines, the priest then anoints the bosom of the worshipers attending and murmurs, have faith, O believers, God is saved, and for us salvation will emerge from his suffering. And this is also connected with Osiris. It says right here, on the following day, March 25th, after the third day, the resurrection of Attis was proclaimed. At least the 4th century's texts tell us. But this is where he argues, even though it's 4th century, there's other sources that showed this was earlier. For example, a bas relief of the Antonine era, middle of the 2nd century, found in Ostia, shows us beside the dead Attis at the foot of the pine, a little Attis standing in some sense reborn. This was the day of the Hilaria, or rejoicings, the first day when the day is longer than the night, spring equinox. So this question needs to be answered. Does this influence the Gospels? It's very possible that it did.
Yeah, in fact, the whole thing about the 3 days and 3 nights versus on the third day seems to refer to this. I mean, how do they get those those different estimates? Well, my guess is one came from the Hilaria, and the other came from that passage.
Inanna.
Oh,
Inanna's dead for 3, but that's also in Jonah too. So Jonah has 3 days and 3 nights. Inanna's dead for 3 days and 3 nights in the Ishtar myth, the descent of Ishtar, and then you have this. This seems like this was a common motif that was floating around for some reason.
Also, the fact that Jonah is appealed to as the type for which the resurrection of Jesus was the antitype. What is that story originally about? it seems to me that what you got here is a remnant, and this is impossible to prove, I know, but of the story of Marduk being devoured by Tiamat, and then emerging, fighting his way out of the carcass and destroying her. That this is a kind of a late retelling of that, which is kind of striking when you see that it's like almost as if Matthew understood that this is really a parallel in more than the sense we usually think to Jesus being in the tomb and returning, like as if the tomb is the Leviathan and so on.
Yeah. Good
And
point.
the tree, I know that people could call the cross a tree because it's made of wood, but he in Galatians he was put to death on the tree.
Yep. And they use the same word for tree in wood, dendros, right?
Uh-huh.
And that's what they call it, dendrophori, the wood carriers, or tree carriers. They're actually bringing out wood to fasten Addis on. It is very close to a crucifixion.
And think of this story of Jesus. He's not the only one that was hoisting that wooden beam on his shoulder on the way to crucifixion. So the other two guys in dendrophori, in a sense. I mean, there's too many different parallels that I guess each relativizes the other, because you could just say it comes from Josephus, that Josephus recognized three guys among the many on the crosses with Vespasian and said, "Hey, I know these guys. Would you mind giving them a break and letting them down?" And he said, "Oh, sure, for you, anything." And only one survived. Now that more striking even, but it's like there's an embarrassment of riches here. Like the person that wrote the super chat said somebody went to a lot of trouble, if this is fiction, to compose it. Well, yeah, but it couldn't have been that hard to do, because they didn't have to do that kind of research that you are doing so well. I mean, you're scouring all sources and ancient texts and so forth. They didn't have to do that. It was these things were all current beliefs. It was in the air at the time.
Yeah. I just wanted to pull something up real quick about this lamb. So Philo uses the word in the life of Moses. He says they consider the feast to be one of liberty and salvation. Now, that's interesting, because the Passover wasn't really a sin atonement festival or ritual. That's the Yom Kippur thing, where they take the two goats and then they do a burnt offering of a ram, and they kill one goat and let another goat free. That's the sin atonement, Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year in Judaism. In Christianity, they kind of combine that with the Passover. They either do it on purpose or they don't know Judaism very well. I think it's the former. I think they're doing it on purpose. I think they know what they're doing. I think they're combining it on purpose. I think there's a reason. And you find this in Philo. Philo, when he's talking about the life of Moses, the way he describes the Passover is if it's like a sin atonement type of thing. So I think this is a Greek Jewish thing, where the Passover becomes salvation now. It becomes salvific, which would line up with other spring equinox cults in Greco-Roman context. So I think you find that as early as Philo. But the funny part is, Philo does not use the word. He uses the word for ram, instead of lamb. So he doesn't use the word omnos. He uses the word krios, ram, which means that's interesting, because they sacrifice a ram for Addis. So all this is starting to line up, and it's like this. It's too much on the nose to just ignore this.
Yeah.
No?
Yeah, I think so too. You're talking about an amazing bunch of coincidences. What are the chances?
Yeah, it's
happens
wild.
to look like it. There's no real connection.
Yeah, it's just, Philo was close, but it's still historical. It's still completely it's all true. Like, really?
If you run across John Dominic Crossan's book, The Cross That Spoke.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, that is amazing in terms of how it looks like these testimonia, these out of context proof texts that that early Christians used, as attested in the Epistle of Barnabas and other places. How you can see how details of the passion narrative seem to have been based on these bits and pieces that were put together. It is really a striking book. After reading it, you wonder, why isn't Crossan a mythicist? He's sure making a good case for it.
You know what else is interesting about Mary is that name in Egyptian context means beloved. And it's one of the titles of Isis. So let me just pull something up real quick to show you. This is very interesting. In Philo plays on this. So Mary might actually be from Philo. Let me demonstrate this right now. This is gonna blow some people away. I'm just gonna get these slides ready real quick, if you don't mind. Just give me 1 second to. I gotta delete a couple of these so I can make room for it. This will be worth it. By the way, Derek says, "Great to see Osiris and Dionysus." Yes. Okay. So if we look at what's it called? Mary. So this is a source from, I got to get rid of thank you, Derek, for that. 39 months, gangster. There's a source from the 4th century BC, so it's not super ancient. You know, we're already in the Hellenistic period, probably, or maybe late Persian, depending on if it's before 335 or not, or 333. Whenever he got to Egypt, I think it was 333 or something like that. Anyways, you have a source that calls Isis the Great, the god's mother, Lady of Heaven, Mary Isis. Now, okay, whatever. That's not a big deal. It's just a title. It could be a coincidence. It could be Marduk. Who knows? It could just be a coincidence. Well, believe it or not, Philo plays on this name. He says there are 3 leaders of the nation: Moses, Aaron, and Miriam. So we're talking about Philo here, and this is what he says. He says, the second over the priesthood and the service of God, the third over prophetic gifts possessed by women. What does that remind you of? Possessed women.
The Maenads of Dionysus.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. The Maenads. There's a Dionysus, and I don't know if people know this. Philo talks about Dionysus in a positive light. Did you know this? And all throughout his works, and he writes a letter to the embassy of Gaius, and he says, "Are you like Bacchus? Did you give gifts to mankind? Wow. And did you cheer everyone up? Were you as good as Bacchus was to the world?" Bacchus is in a positive light. But check this out. Philo writes in the Allegories of the Law, Aaron is the logos and Miriam is perception, aesthesis. When they rose up against Moses, were expressly told that if there shall rise a prophet to the Lord, God shall be made known to him in a vision, in a shadow, but not clearly. But with Moses, who is faithful in all his house, God will speak mouth to mouth in his own form and not by riddles. Now, that's crazy that you have the logos and perception, Jesus and Mary. Mary being the monadic figure of Jesus' ministry. Jesus is surrounded by his Bacchants and his Maenads. You have Mary, the same name as Isis. Osiris, Dionysus, Isis. I've talked about this on my channel, how when you look at Diodorus and Philo's, Diodorus and Plutarch, 1st century BC, 1st century CE, Greek sources, they combine Osiris and Dionysus into one god. And you even have stories about Osiris being son of Semele and being born after a 7-month tradition.
That giveaway, yeah.
Yeah, and then it's like he's born after a 7-month term, and it's called an epiphany. And Epiphanius uses the same exact language for Jesus in one of these lost gospels that he talks about.
Wow.
So something like, look, Mary being Maenadic and And so, and also have being the name of Isis, beloved. I don't know, man. And the fact that there's so many different characters in the New Testament, either named Mary or Martha. Are they all representing of Maenads? M-A?
Well, I think Kathleen Corley, a pal of mine from the Jesus Seminar, in one of her books, she says that judging from ancient records of the time of Jesus, 50% of Jewish women in Palestine were named either Mary, Mariam, Miriam, etc., or Salome. And the other ones, all sorts of stuff. But these had been names of Herodian nobility. And just like the poor are always enamored of the rich, like in soap operas and so on, that they wanted to name their kids, I guess for good luck, by the name of these queens and countesses and so forth. So it could simply be that. But on the other hand, Jesus is, as you say, he is followed by a group of women who pay his bills and so forth. And I guess cook the food. I don't know what else, but what's going on there?
It's very Maenadic. It's very Bacchic and Maenadic for sure.
Or like the
and they anoint his feet with perfumes and oils. It's very Bacchic and Dionysian going. It's like the imagery of all that. Mm-hmm. And so, and the fact that Philo calls Mary from the Old Testament the possessed oracle, like you know what I mean? It's like this is coming through Philonic Judaism, Greek Judaism.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
It's not that different even from Hasidic Jews today who have like Pentecostal ecstasy and so forth. It's not. It's nothing that would have been that odd to Jews.
Yeah, good point. We have Danny Neba 199 says 1 Corinthians 15:17. I actually pulled it up. It says, "And if Christ has not been raised, your faith is vain. Ye are yet in your sins." All right. I guess that's true, right? If he hasn't been
Romans, that is interesting because it implies, as in Romans 10, I think 9 and 10, if you believe with your mouth, believe in your heart, if you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God has raised him from the dead, you'll be saved. For he died for our sins and was raised for our justification or whatever. That's interesting because it's not just an atoning death. It implies the whole complex of death and resurrection was the means of salvation. And that fits in pretty well with what is said about baptism in the letter to the Romans, and I think in 1 Corinthians, that you die with Christ and are raised with him by being dunked under the water and brought out again. And that's exactly the logic of the mystery religions. You underwent some ritual that mimicked or mimed the fate, the saving fate of whoever the Redeemer is in your religion. The devotees of Hercules, who died and rose and was exalted to heaven, they would don a lion's mane and do whatever ritual thing, because Hercules had done that with a Nemean lion. I think the Mithraists had a bloodbath ceremony. The Tarabolium or Creabolium, the latter meaning the blood of the ram. Brother, have you been washed in the blood of the ram? And it's so similar. The logic of it is you don't just believe in the Savior, you repeat what he did to save us. And it's like sacred time returning, like Mircea Eliade talks about. The time of salvation has returned as you unite with the saving deed of the Savior. And so that all kind of fits. And where does it come from? How does it have any meaning other than that which those rites had in mystery religions? Again, it was in the air. That was the way you thought about salvation.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you for that super chat. I did want to show something real quick before I go to the next one. I want to show, because someone might go, that's nuts. There's no way that anything about Dionysus would ever be said about Jesus. They hate, like, the Jews hate pagans. And actually, let's read what Philo says. Philo says, have you imitated Bacchus in any respect? Have you been an inventor of any new blessings to mankind? Have you filled the whole of the habitable world with joy as he did? Are all Asia and Europe inadequate to contain the gifts which you have been showered upon mankind by you? No doubt you have invented new arts and sciences. And then he says over here, in another paragraph, Bacchus rendered the vine susceptible of cultivation and extracted the most delicious drink from it, which is at the same time most beneficial to the souls and bodies of men, leading to the first to cheerfulness, working in them a forgetfulness of evils and a hope of blessings, and making the latter more healthy and vigorous and active and supple. And so Bacchus gets good press among these Greek-speaking Jews, though it's not that crazy to think John's gospel, which drawing from Philo, would also imitate Bacchus to create the Jesus story.
Yeah, it's like MacDonald says in the Dionysian Gospel, you can find truckloads of Euripides of the Bacchae in the book of Acts and in the Gospel of John. I am the true vine and so forth. There's no question where that, or changing the water into wine at Cana. Come on, that's got to be Dionysian influence.
Yep. Plutarch writes in his Symposiacs, which god is worshipped by the Jews? I'll just read it out to you real quick.
Mm-hmm.
He says, here, Symmachus, greatly wonderings of what spoken was, what Lamprius, you will permit our tutelary god called Evius, the title of Bacchus. Evius, the inciter of women, famous for the honors he has conferred upon him by madmen, to be inscribed and enrolled in the mysteries of the Jews? Or is there any solid reason that can be given to prove Adonis to be the same as Bacchus? Here, Mayorgenes interposing says, do not be so fierce upon him, for I, who am an Athenian, answer you and tell you, in short, that these two are the very same, Yahweh and Bacchus.
Mm-hmm.
And no man is able to fit or bring the chief confirmation of this truth, and those among us who are initiated and skilled in triennial or chief mysteries of the God. But what no religion forbids to speak of among friends, especially over wine, the gift of Bacchus, I am ready at command of those gentlemen to disclose. When all the company requested and earnest begged of him, first he said, the time and manner and greatest and most holy solemnity of the Jews is exactly agreeable to the holy rites of Bacchus, for which they call the feast they celebrate in the midst of vintage. This is the Sukkot festival he's talking about, furnishing their tables with all sorts of fruits, while they sit under tabernacles made of vines and ivy, and that day, which they immediately goes before this, they call the Day of Tabernacles. Within a few days after the feast, not darkly but openly dedicated to Bacchus, for they have a feast among them called Cratophoria, carrying palm trees. And he goes on to say, he says, for they have little trumpets, as the Greeks do, and have their bacchanalia to call upon their gods. Either they go before them playing harps, which are called the Levites, whether named for Lucius or Evius. I don't know if he's right about that. Either word agrees with Bacchus. And I suppose that their Sabbaths have some relation to Bacchus. For even now, the Greeks call the Bacchae by the name Sabbae. So he goes into a deep argument, arguing that Dionysus and Yahweh are the same God.
Who is this again?
Plutarch.
And what's the text?
Symposiacs.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, you know, in First Maccabees, I think it is. It says that Antiochus Epiphanes caused the Jews to, at gunpoint, so to speak, to participate in the revels of Dionysus. That's not that odd if they thought Dionysus and Yahweh were the same God, as some actually say. And this it didn't involve much of a compromise.
Check this out. So this name for Yahweh in the Chaldean oracles, this is a 2nd century source, Dionysus or Bacchus was called by the Chaldeans Yao instead of the intelligible light in the Phoenician tongue, and is frequently called Sabaoth or Sabazius, such as he who is above the 7 poles, the Demiurgus, which is very Platonic. They use that word. That name of Yao with 3 letters is found in the Greek Septuagint, in the oldest Greek Septuagint manuscripts. So that's they have the same exact name. Even Apollo is called Yeos in some context. Yod Eta, Yeos, and that's the name of the Ionians. So there's some sort of, I don't know. We're throwing a lot at these people right now, but there's something going on.
The fuller the picture you get, the more the less you resort to the idea of, oh, well, this was borrowed from these guys. It's like it's all one big sprawling culture with a lot of names for a lot of things, but it isn't like going outside your religion, which, again, apologists, Jewish and Christian, say it is, because in their context, the religions have defined themselves as separate communities in a way that not all did in ancient history, and they kind of were syncretistic. It's no, and this idea that Jews would never do that. Well, sorry, but they did. Look at these astrological mosaics and stuff in like what, 2nd and 3rd century Palestinian synagogues. You telling me that they weren't open to the influence of Hellenistic religions? Come on.
Yeah. Real quick before we go on to the next super, I just want people to see something real quick. So Apollo was called by this name Ye, which is the first 2 letters of the name of Jesus in Greek, Jesus. And look at, if you can read Greek, you could see Yeos. That's one of the names of Apollo. And he's a healer god. Jesus is a healer god. He's the light of the world. Jesus is the light of the world. So there's some sort of Bacchic, Apollonian, Dionysian, almost like a Nietzschean dichotomy that you find in these gospels between these 2 gods. Interesting. And they both have the name Yah. Like Dionysus has the name Yah, and Apollo has the name Ye. And then there's even sources where they talk about, like Macrobius says that Dionysus and Apollo are the same god. They're like 2 different faces of the same god. And then you have the etymology of the Ionians. So the western or the eastern coast of the Aegean, or western coast of Turkey, I should say, whichever way you're looking at it. These people were called, going back to the Bronze Age. If you know Greek, you'll see on the top right, I've highlighted where it says iota, alpha, and it looks like an F. That's a digamma. It makes a W sound. So they were called Yahweh-ness, and they worship, and it means devotees of Yahweh. And then, but the god is not Yahweh; it's Apollo, and it comes from the Proto-Indo-European root for the word power, Yah, which is the name. The word El in Semitic means power too.
Yeah, that's right.
So maybe Yahweh came from the north as a Hittite or Aegean god or something.
That's right. I've heard that just recently from Derek. He mentioned somebody's theory that he was a metallurgic deity that came up from the south, or so and so from the north. I can't remember the specifics now.
Yeah, Carl Kareni's Dionysus book from like the 1970s. he actually shows evidence that there was a title of Dionysus in the Cretan Bronze Age, the Minoans, that calls him Yah.
Whoa.
It calls him. I can pull. I'll read it right now for the people. Yakar and Yakos, and we know Yakos. Actually, you can see where Bakos comes from.
Yeah.
Yakos, Vakos, Bakos. It's like it's an evolution of the word.
Mm-hmm.
And then he says, this is what he says. At Knossos, we find the name Yawako, whose Greek reading can be Yakos, or Yakos. At Knossos and at Pylos, so in the Greek mainland, it is often takes the form Yawaka or Yakar, a name for the star Sirius that seems utterly alien to the Greek language, may not have been so foreign. An Egyptian story can be cited in connection with the Minoan names Yakar and Yakos. So there's little tiny bits of evidence out there suggesting that whoever this Yah God or Yahweh God is might have some sort of Bronze Age Mediterranean roots. And look, we know that the Cretans are the scholarly consensus is that the Philistines came from Crete.
Mm-hmm.
And then it might be connected to the word Pelasgian. That's another question. But the Philistines are Aegean people, Greek people. So the five Philistine cities are from the Aegean. Then it's not that crazy to think that their gods would have been brought over there too.
Oh, yeah, not at all. Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Wow. You know, I really must commend you for the depth and detail of your research, Neil.
Yeah, this has been a long time coming, man. I'm in here in my laboratory all the time, like an autist, trying to figure out where these gods came from. Thunderstorm drops $10, says, have you heard the theory the Canaanites' real faith is Kabbalah and Judaism publicly Teshuvah, acknowledging wrongdoing public and private as a form of scapegoat?
That's new to me, which doesn't mean anything against it. I'm learning all kinds of stuff here.
Yeah, I mean, the idea of if what are we defining Kabbalah as? Is it mystical Judaism? Well, that always existed to some extent. Is Kabbalah the Kabbalah that we find in the medieval periods? Then that's later. So I don't know if you can find Kabbalah and Canaanite religion. And I don't know how far back you mean by Canaanite. Are you talking Bronze Age Ugaritic Canaanites? Then no, there's no Kabbalah there. Are we talking about later? You mentioned and Judaism publicly. Are we talking Hellenistic period? Then they're not really the Canaanites anymore. They're Jews at that point. So it's like, I don't know. It's interesting. I wouldn't be surprised if there was an esoteric inner mysteries of Second Temple Judaism, though. And it might be mystical Merkava type of, some sort of proto Kabbalah thing going on. I wouldn't doubt.
We find elements of that in the Dead Sea Scrolls, actually,
Exactly.
at least the throne chariot business. There's a book that I suspect nobody else reads anymore, but came out in the 60s, I think. Hugh Schoenfield, famous or infamous for the Passover plot, a totally misunderstood book in its own right. But in his book, Those Incredible Christians, he has chapters on how the Christology of Ephesians and Colossians bears a striking resemblance to the later Kabbalah. And if you've read anything about that, like Isaac Luria, his system sounds so much like that of Basilides. You have to wonder if they just reinvented the same wheel or there was some kind of secret transmission of this stuff. But I would really recommend anybody interested in this to read Schoenfield, which is Schonfield, Those Incredible Christians, and Gershom Scholem, Scholem, Varieties of Jewish, what is that? I think it's Varieties of Jewish Mysticism.
Yeah.
And that is a mind-blowing book that goes into Sabbatai Tzvi, Isaac Luria, Jacob Frank, the different Hasidic movements. It just, I read it in connection with possible backgrounds of New Testament doctrine, even despite the huge chronological gap. And I found astounding stuff. The parallels between early Christianity and the aftermath of the apostasy of Sabbatai Tzvi are just astounding and really cast light on the Gospels. So these things may seem too far removed, but they are not. You owe it to yourself to read these things.
Yeah. Interesting. Thank you for that super chat. I definitely think there's something going on there. Lost my spot for a second. Let me think. Where'd it go? Oh, here we go. Daniel Kyle gives 5 Gnostic Forum memberships. Thank you, Daniel. I appreciate that. I'm gonna have to drop my next membership only / Patreon video very, very soon. It's coming the next day or two. So stay tuned for that. Thank you for that. Daniel Kyle, thank you for another $10 super chat. Thoughts, Dr. Price, about Jesus receiving his mysteries from both the Essenes and also the Dionysian Hypsisterians. Did his sacred rites have common roots? Was he the teacher of Simon Magus?
I think insofar as we can take anything from ancient sources about Simon Magus, that I would go with what they say in the Pseudo-Clementines, that Simon was the chief disciple of John the Baptist, who may have been part of the Qumran Essene movement or whatever it was. And if Jesus indeed was a historical figure who had association with John, though he must have broken with him from certain signals in the Gospels, he still spoke well of him. There could be influence there because they all appear in the same sort of matrix of what Kurt Rudolph calls, in his great book, Gnosis, he calls what is the phrase? This matrix of Jordan River baptizing gnosis. It's probably hard to even distinguish them, but yeah, I can well imagine that the historical Jesus, Simon Magus, John the Baptist, James the Just, and Dositheus of Samaria were all leaders or analogous or saints in this ill-defined Mandean, Nazarene kind of mixture, which I think of as like the Schwärmerei that Martin Luther spoke of. All the sectarian groups that came out of the Reformation that Calvin and Luther thought were a bunch of nuts and fanatics, but didn't take much to get that out of them. But I tend to, and I'm pointing to the books on the shelf as if you could see them. Robert Eisenman speaks of this, of these Essenes with a capital E, as comprised of all sorts of these similar and possibly related, possibly also feuding rival groups in the Jordan Valley. So a connection of some sort between all these people is entirely plausible, though difficult to demonstrate. But that doesn't mean you can just turn agnosticism into fideism and say, oh, well, I know Jesus was unique and didn't learn anything from anybody else. No, it's an open question. With the Dionysian Hypsisterians, that means those who believe in the ultimate God?
Yes, there's a thought in Hypsisterian tradition that it was basically a progression of the Sabazius cult into a God Most High, no images, no very almost like pagan Judaism type of thing.
Well, yeah, I don't know enough about them to know if there was a relationship there, and geographically, I wonder how much contact was possible between them and
And these scenes,
Galilean Jews. But who
right?
knows? I sure don't.
I do know that the Hypsisterians were in close contact with Christians later, like the fourth and fifth, because Gregory of Nazianzus was a Hypsisterian who converted to
Oh my
Christianity.
gosh, really?
Yeah, and he talks about how close both his parents were Hypsisterians, and there was like they were all in the same circles. They were all like kind of dwelling among it. It almost makes me think that when Paul talks about like God-fearers, he's talking about these Hypsisterians. And not only that, when he talks about when you go and eat these meat sacrificed to idols, you'll be around people, when you're around these pagans, don't treat them bad. Eat their food, be nice to them. I think he's talking about these people. And because the goal was to get these people to become Christians, and I think they succeeded in that. I think they got them all. I think they got, because they're all wiped out by the time you get to 4th, 5th century.
Wow.
So, yeah. There's I think that's where a lot of these churches come from, is these circles. So I see where Daniel's going with this.
Wow. Very
Thank you for that.
interesting. Yeah.
Let's see. We have quite a few. All right. Rami Hyder, thank you for the 5. New headcanon. Baal Yahweh Marduk, slaying of the Leviathan, is inspired by the Hittite Indo-European storm god, slaying of the snake, Kaios Skamph, as it's consistent across Indo-European myths.
Yeah, you see that with Indra. How did Indra take over as king of the Vedic gods when Varuna had the job originally? Well, he destroyed Vritra, the drought dragon, who was causing the world to perish. And Indra managed to open up the floodgates and water the world. And he didn't exactly create the world, but it was pretty much the same thing. And so that's and Zeus with Typhon, and Apollo with against the same monster. You begin to see again that it's all one huge cognitive universe over there. They weren't hermetically sealed off from one another. No pun intended.
You love that term, don't you?
Yeah, I can't help but think.
I like it too. Yeah, hermetically. But yeah, the Hittites had this storm god, Tarhuns, or in this case, what's the other one called? Tarhuns? Yeah, Tarhuns. Hurrying, or Teshub. That's the other one. That's the one I was thinking of. These weather gods. So it makes sense that these weather gods would become the kings or the pantheons, because in this time period, they lived and died by the weather. Salvation was from the weather. When it rained, you got your crops, you got your water, your salvation comes from the rain. So I can see why the storm god was the king of the gods for a while. And then after a while, when you start getting into the Roman period, all of a sudden the king of the gods sort of shifts into like solar deities. There's like this new kick. It's like Sol Invictus and Mithras and solar. All of a sudden, solar theism is the thing, and which means, I don't know. Maybe there's just some reason why the solar god took over the storm god. I don't know. There's probably reasons for it.
Well, because the sun defeats the storm. That could have something to do with it. Also, it makes me think of how Noah, who saves the human race and is the discoverer of wine, is kind of a reflection of this, because Noah, I am told, I don't know Hebrew, is just a reshuffling of the same consonants that make up Enoch. And Enoch was the same. He was a sun god originally. And so in a sense, you got to wonder if Noah was also, and if the invention of wine had something to do with that, because you have a storm god motif there. He survives the terrors of the world flood, and like Bacchus is the giver of wine, and he's given immortality. In the Babylonian version, Utnapishtim, who's the flood survivor, is given immortality by the gods as a reward. And so was Enoch in some connection. He was taken. He walked with God like as the sun through the heavens. 365 day or year life. So there are these connections between these gods. One is another version of the other, a mutation of the other. Hard to say, hard to come up with a systematic theology of this stuff.
So I think I have a better theory than that, but that is very I think you're might be onto something there. Not that was bad, but let me throw something at you real quick. Let me just drop this down for a second. Where is it? Okay. So check this out. There's an Egyptian god called Nu, and it's just like Noah is just two letters. Noah and Noach, like Noach, like Noach, right? Noah. It's just two letters. Nu is like that too, but it's Egyptian. You know, this is both Afro-Asiatic languages. And the funny part about Nu is he's the water god. He's like the watery chaos, waters of chaos, the flood, waters of chaos. But guess what? Check this out. We found this papyri of a solar disk on a solar bark or ark, where there's 8 gods on there. 8 is what we find in Noah's Ark. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So the god Nun lifts up the solar bark, and there's 8 deities that survives the cosmic flood. And these are the Aeneid, the 9 gods that create the world. The Aeneid. But it's Noah lifting up 8 people.
Wow.
8 gods. The Aeneid. So you have a god named Nua, or Nu, or Nun, and he's the flood god. He's the primordial flood god. What? Wow. To me, I think Noah comes from this.
That's what you're right.
But it's just a thought. It's just a theory. I could be wrong.
Isn't that also what the version of Noah that you find in the Quran and from Arabic?
Yeah, Arabic. It's Nu, N-U. Noah in Arabic. Let me just look that up. Noah in Islam. Yes, it's Nu. Exactly. N-U-H. So it's and that's Egyptian is very close to Arabic. So there might be something with that. I don't know. Obviously, I'll have to ask some Egyptologists that question, but that's just something I noticed, and I've kind of been running with it for a while because of the 8. The concept of 8 gods survive. This is in the myth, by the way. This is in the myth. I could probably pull it up real quick where it actually tells you the myth where 8 gods survive a cosmic flood that restarts the world. Like, that is too much on the nose for me to ignore that. You know what I mean? It's called it's the papyrus. I forgot what it's called. But it's one of these papyruses that they found in a burial chamber. So it's like it's part of the Book of the Dead, pretty much, but it's like a different variation. Anyways, let's go to the next one. Enduring motifs. Hilaria festival might just be the Egyptian Koach festival, Sokar Osirian. Both are about death and resurrection. Well, yeah. And not only that, they called the Osiris festival Hilaria in the Hellenistic period, and the Roman period. Sorry, not Hellenistic. In the Roman period, you had 2 Hilarias, one for Egypt, one for Osiris in Egypt, and one for Attis in Rome. And they both were called Hilaria. Did you know that?
Yeah, that's important. It's the same. It's like 2 local versions of the same thing.
Exactly. And I'll show you where it says, like, here. I'll just pull up just to quickly show people what Britannica says about this. Britannica. Hilaria in Roman religion, day of merriment and rejoicing of Cybele Attis in the Isis Osiris cult, March 25th and November 3rd, respectively. It was one of the several days in the festival of Cybele that honored Attis. Or some blah 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 blah. The point is, it's not just it's not just Attis, it's Osiris too.
Wow.
Which kind of goes with the whole James Frazier theory. which makes me think he's onto something here.
And
So-
both had the holy women seeking out the corpse
Yes.
and perhaps raising it, just like Mary Magdalene and the others come to the tomb for Jesus.
There are statues, Roman statues of Isis Sibylle. Yeah, it looks like it's the Black Madonna. Here, I have it right here. Here, this is a Reddit page, but I know I've already talked to an Artemis scholar on this. And this is whenever you see the black skin like this, it means this Roman period, because the older ones are white, are not dark. The Black Madonna is a Roman, and it's Isis, Sibylle, Artemis, all rolled into one goddess.
Wow.
And the reason why they can tell that is because the tower signifies Sibylle, the statue itself is Artemisian, and there's Egyptian Isis motifs all over it.
Wow.
So this sort of fertility goddess was big in Roman period. So Isis and Sibylle were merged at some point, and that's what you find. That's what you find in Apuleius.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you that. Am I correct remembering that when Isis appears to Lucius in the thing, she claims to be all the different goddesses?
Yes, that's Apuleius is golden. Apuleius is golden ass.
Yeah, boy.
Lucius
What do you
Apuleius.
know?
Yep. And that's 2nd century. So, we talk about Christianity being this 1st century phenomena. It's really a 2nd century phenomena.
Yeah,
the 1st century is very much shrouded in he said, she said. We start finding sources for Christianity in the early 2nd, middle 2nd. That's when you first getting church fathers, Justin Martyr, Papias, that type of stuff. Clement of Rome, 96, whatever. Like that's when you start seeing Christianity pop up. Besides Paul, so the Gospels, post 70 AD. Some people think Luke and John are both 2nd century, that type of thing.
Yeah.
So,
all right. This is none of my business, but I just got to ask, Neil, have you ever looked into a doctoral program, a graduate degree, that kind of thing?
People say this to me all the time, but maybe one day when I have a lot of time and I'm not trying to, I don't know. I thought about it. I might get into it soon.
You would love it, and you wouldn't have any trouble with it.
Yeah. No, I think I should maybe.
Yeah.
People tell me this all the time that I should get a PhD because it'll just give me more credibility of what I'm doing, and I'll learn better methodology. Of course, it'd be better, but it's expensive to go to school. It's thousands of dollars a semester.
Scholarship, possibly.
Really?
Yeah. I had virtually complete financial aid with when I went to Drew and got my 2nd PhD. I guess I don't know if I did it on the 1st one or not. I can't remember, losing my faculties here, which is why I'll need you to take over for me.
Yeah,
but I would I would sure take a close look at that.
Yeah, I'd be open to that for sure. If I can get like some sort of, definitely. But we'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
Let's see. Where's the next one at? Hilaria Festival. Here it is. All right. We have a few more. Onyx Rock. Thank you for the super chat. Bookshelf tour when? I'm gonna do it soon. I'm gonna do a video where I just sit here by myself and just pick off every single one and explain to you why it's here and what it's about.
I'd love to hear
I think that'd be a good video. I'll do a
pretty
live
long one, I'll bet.
It would be pretty long, so I might have to just maybe do a section at a time. If I get to 3 hours, we'll cut it off and we'll put a little mark on the bookshelf and go like that. That's a good idea, though. I think that'd be a good stream.
Yeah,
because every single book you find behind me, it's all ancient. It's all either Roman or Greek or Latin or Babylonian or Hittite or Bible. Like that's all pseudepigrapha, Plato, Aristotle. There's Homer right there. There's a bunch of history books right there. All that stuff. Yeah. Anyways, thank you for that super chat, by the way. So I will do that. I'm glad you reminded me. I will definitely do that. Daniel Kyle is back with another one. Book, become a member. $5 a month. Support Neil. Thank you, Daniel. I appreciate that so much for you saying that. I appreciate that. And everyone that does join, I appreciate you as well. And I will be, like I said, I will be dropping a members only / Patreon only video very soon. I'm working on one right now, so you'll see it in the next day or two. We got another one from Warlight. Thank you for the $10. The Nehushtan serpent on cross might have inspired the crucifixion. Gods were punished or sharing knowledge. Prometheus, Tantalus, and Ophites believed Jesus gave gnosis to Adam as the serpent.
Yes.
Very true. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I speculate in one of my books that this may be one of the many Gnostic features of the Gospel of John before the ecclesiastical redactor got a hold of it, because why would you pick, well, I guess you could say you could pick Nehushtan as a Christ metaphor because of the elevation on a pole, but it seems to me, since we do have ancient Gnostics, etc., making that connection explicit, that that may be the origin of that. As Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so will the Son of Man be lifted up, so that whoever looks upon him will be saved, or whatever. That I think that was probably more than a metaphor, and that they may have thought that Jesus was the serpent. Philo, discussing the Eden story, says the name of the serpent was Eve. Right. I don't quite know what to make of that one, but it does sort of fit in with what I know of, like the hypostasis of the archons and so on. And it sure fits the Promethean serpent analog. I wouldn't be surprised at all. The Naasines, whose name also means the serpentites, they believe that Attis, Adam, and Jesus were all the same.
Yes, Naasines, yep.
Yeah, so that might, I mean, you have a kind of musical chairs thing going on with Adam, even the serpent, but that's significant in itself, it seems to me. I don't quite know what to make of it, but I have a lot of sympathy toward that possibility.
Yeah, the Naasines, definitely the 2nd century phenomena, and it seems to be where the crossover between the pagans and the Christians really took root. So you get sort of like a Greek magical papyri style Christian in those circles in Asia Minor, mixing and matching.
I have to believe that the Naasines or Ophite Gnostics were somehow a continuation of the Nehushtan cult of the Old Testament.
Yeah,
I mean, it's the same word, and they've got a divine serpent. And you think of the Kundalini and the Quetzalcoatl as sort of a universal archetype. But I'm just, wheels spinning.
I agree. Hippolytus writes this, and he's quoting from the Nicene preacher. He doesn't say his name. He just says the Nicene preacher.
Yeah, we don't have the name. Yeah.
Yeah, he says, the Nicene says, to ascertain Allah Comenus, the first of men, rose up the Boeotians over Lake Cephissus, or whether the Idaean Curites, a divine race, or the Phrygian Corybantes, whom the sun beheld springing up after the manner of the growth of trees, or whether in Arcadia brought forth Pelasgus. These are all primordial men like Adam, by the way, or of greater antiquity than the moon, or Eleusis produced Dialis, an inhabitant. He's doing comparative mythology. That's what he's doing. He's going over here, you have Adam, over here you have Pelasgus, over here you have this person. And he also says the rice. Here you go. You also had this hymn that you find in the Nicene preacher where he says, whether you are the race of Saturn or Jupiter or Rhea, Hal Attis, gloomy mutilation of Rhea, Assyrians call you thrice long Adonis, all of Egypt calls you Osiris, celestial horn. Greeks denominate you wisdom. Samothracians, Adam. Haomians, Corybas. Phrygians, Papa. He's like just doing this huge
Mm.
comparative mythology thing and saying Jesus is the equivalent of all these gods. And they call it the word nos, meaning serpent. And it actually lines up with John, what is it, John 4? Which one is it that John, just as the serpent lifted up son. Let me see, I'll pull that up right now. That is John 3. John 3:14. So let me see if I can share. I think I lost my page that I had Cross Bible up for a second. Well, I could pull it back up. 1 second. John 3. 1 second. John 3. And where's the Greek? Okay. So, oops, wrong one. John 3:14. It says, just as Moses lifted up the snake in the wilderness, and it's kai katos Moses upsesos, and then it uses the word ophin. That everyone who believes in that, so the Son of Man must be lifted up. That's an ophite passage right there. You know, there's your ophin right there. No, think about it. The ophins are biblically backed with their theology. The serpent is lifted up just like the snake in the wilderness. You know what I mean? And then it uses that Zoe ion. That's the name of God. That's the name of the God Ion right there. It says right there, Hina in order, pas ho pisteon, and autoi eke zoen ionion. And so the Zoe eternal. That might be a play on this God Ion, right?
Yeah, I often wonder what he had to do with the ions in the pleroma, because I'm told somewhere that Ion was the god of eternal time.
Yes.
This lion-headed guy with wrapped in a snake.
There it is right there again. Zoane Ionion. We translate it as eternal life. It's always in the English as eternal life, but in the Greek, it would have sparked a little trigger in the Greek mind. They would have heard Zoane Ionion. They would have heard that name Ion, Zoe Ion. So imagine you're 2nd century Greek and you hear Zoane Ion. You're going, oh, the god Ion, right? It might trigger that. I don't know. I'm not saying it definitely does, but the god Ion, everyone knows, is this deity. Let me pull him up real quick. This is pretty interesting. People don't know about Ion. They should. This Ion deity, Hellenistic deity, long period of time, right? This is him right here. Well, if you actually go down and look at like where he came from, it says Ion is identified with Dionysus in Christian and Neoplatonic circles, but there are no references to Dionysus as Ion before the Christian era. Euripides calls Ion a son of Zeus. The Suda identifies Ion with Osiris and Adonis. This is like the Nicene preacher right here, right? Look at this. Look at this. Epiphanius, I've done videos on this already, so everyone knows this. Epiphanius says that the Alexandrian Ion's birth from Cori the Virgin, that's Persephone, by the way, Persephone the Virgin, was celebrated on January 6th, which is the Christian calendar for the Epiphany. On this day, this is what Epiphanius says, on this day and at this hour, the Virgin gave birth to Ion. The date, which coincides with the Epiphany, brought New Year's celebrations to a close and the cycle of time that Ion embodies. The Alexandrian Ion may be a form of Osiris Dionysus reborn annually. That's from Jarl Fossum's book. I actually had that book. I read that book. I have the PDF of it. But yeah, you can see how the Mithraic religion and the Christian religion is playing off of this. You know?
Wow. Hmm. Boy, what a world of religion, cosmic associations.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Jeez.
Couple more. Will Seymour 3 says, thank you for the super chat. The world teacher, aka Imam Mahdi, will be seen by all, not as a religious figure. Huge cover up. UFOs. Search Benjamin Cream. Thank you for the super chat. I don't know what that means, but I'll look into it. What do you think about that?
Well, the Islamic Mahdi is there's a Shiite. Well, he and Jesus will return together to initiate a golden age of Islamic theocracy and justice all over the world. And I know a guy I know just wrote a book where he thinks that eventually we will be told that UFOs are landing or attacking or something, but that it will actually be demons. And so if one is not a oh, wait a minute, world teacher. I didn't catch the other names, but it says also known as Imam Mahdi, Maitreya Buddha, the Messiah, Krishna, and so on.
Sounds very new age to me.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen this video yet?
All.
Have you seen this video yet? Let me play it
No.
for you. Is it playing?
Yeah, I think so.
I can't hear anything. Oh, did I mute this? Unmute. There we go.
I am Abdullah, the first name mentioned of the Mahdis, and I have come forth as the successor of Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam and the awaited Yemeni Imam Ahmad al-Hassan alayhi salam. No one in 1400 years has claimed to be Abdullah in the will but me, proving that the will truly is a protection against misguidance, for none can claim to be in the will except for its rightful owner.
Wow, that's intense, isn't it?
Well, there have been a whole mess of self-proclaimed Mahdis. I give a list of them in my book, The Houses of the Holy, a higher critical survey of the world religions. And I give explanations of who these guys were. I mean, there's at least a dozen of them. I can't quite remember who were like the founder of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community and various others. The Sudanese Mahdi that Chinese Gordon defeated, like in the Charlton Heston movie. Forget what the heck it was called. But there's a whole mess of them. And so I'm not sure what this guy is. I don't understand what the terms.
I don't either. I just thought he was talking about that video.
Yeah, fascinating. I've never heard of it.
No, it is fascinating. All I'll say to that is, all right, we'll see if you're the Mahdi or not. We'll see.
Yeah, boy.
Like, time will tell. Like, well, no, I'm not gonna walk around and wait for it. I'll just wait for you to prove it. All right. So thank you for that. Solar Knights, is modern Christianity pure paganism?
I'm not sure what that's intended to mean, that it's lost its true holiness and then become secularized or something.
I would say no. I would say no, because paganism is ancestral. It's local. It's for, like, the Nordic pagans are doing Nordic pagan things, and Christianity is universal, worldwide. It's very the opposite. The Pope he wants everyone to convert. He doesn't care about ancestral religions and ancestral customs. He cares about Christianity. So that's why I would say no to that.
Yeah, if that's what he means by paganism, because sometimes a question like that means it's now not the true Christian religion anymore. But I'm not sure what the questioner has in mind.
Yeah, that's true. Thank you for that super chat. Thunderstorm, thank you for the $10. Mary is also cognate for Minerva.
Oh, didn't know that. Interesting.
Yeah, I didn't know that either. Interesting. I'll have to look into that. Thank you for that super chat. Greek informant in the house. Thank you for the 10. What is the relationship between Jesus' portrayal as Christ-like and the ideal of the Stoic sage? To what extent is Jesus modeled after a Stoic ideal of justice, righteousness, and moral perfection?
Well, he's more often compared to the Cynics, but of course they were the progenitors of the Stoics,
Right.
and there's a lot of parallels between the sayings of attributed to Jesus and those of many different Stoic and Cynic authors. I have a whole mess of those compiled in my Deconstructing Jesus, and again in I think my Judaizing Jesus, and because there it's quite impressive, though actually, as Abraham Mallarby pointed out, the Pauline epistles, whoever wrote them, are very heavily influenced by or aligned with Stoicism, and of course so is the Epistle of James, though it sort of gives a nod to Jewish Torah nomism. It's very Stoic, and the book of Fourth Maccabees uses the horrifying torturing to death of the 7 Maccabean brothers who will not give in to Seleucid persecution. The author uses them as perfect examples of the Stoic, and so there's a lot of commonality. And with Jesus, with all of the stuff about giving away what you own to the poor and all that, that's more like contemporary cynicism, which was around in his neighborhood. And so some scholars like Crossan and the late David Seeley and Burton Mack make a big deal out of suggesting that Jesus was at least a cynic-like sage, that he was not an apocalyptist or a healer or anything. And that's a viable theory that's still current. And I'm sure if you haven't looked into it already, you would much enjoy it.
And also the logos is a Stoic idea too.
Yes, that's right.
And the idea of laying up treasures in heaven, not on earth. Epictetus says it's not things themselves that disturb people, but their judgments about them. It's like this sort of idea of material things not being more important than the spiritual. That's a very Stoic attitude. So there is definitely a Stoic leaning of Jesus in some of these Gospels.
Yeah, I think you're on the right track.
And that the logos, reason, that type of thing, very Stoic leaning. Yeah, and like you said, Stoic / Cynic is like, obviously, Antisthenes was the teacher of Diogenes. Diogenes taught Crates, and Crates was taught the founder of Stoicism, Zeno. So Stoicism comes out of cynicism. I think cynicism is just a more wild version of Stoicism. Stoicism sort of calms everything down, brings things back to reality a little bit.
The Cynics were like the early Taoists and the 60s hippies.
Yes.
They wanted to get back to nature, and they didn't care what you thought about it. If that scandalizes you, it's good for you. Fascinating people.
Oh yeah, and that becomes the backbone of Middle Platonism. You have that Stoic tradition that comes from cynicism. You have Plato and Diogenes fighting each other in Athens, beefing, literally. Diogenes would come in to storm Plato's teachings and go, "This is Plato's man," holding a chicken in his hand, and all his Plato's students would laugh, and Plato would get all like red faced. "Shut up, Diogenes, get out of here." And they kind of hated each other. Well, they were both different masters of different schools, but then you can see both of their traditions come back together in Middle Platonism. The Stoics and the Platonists come together as Middle Platonists. So it's like the reunification of Plato and Diogenes into Middle Platon, and that's where you get Christianity from. Christianity's Middle Platon. Philo was a Middle Platonist. So
yes,
it's very interesting how that works. Thank you for that super chat.
isn't it amazing? You have this chain of discipleship. Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Alexander the Great. Holy mackerel, talk about an apostolic succession.
Yeah.
Oof.
Yeah. And then Alexander the Great also meets Diogenes, and when he sacks the city, and he's like, I think it was in Corinth, not Athens, but for some reason, they're pretty close to each other. But yeah, he's in Corinth, and Alexander's like, do you need anything from me? And he's like, just get out of my sunlight, dude.
Yeah. I
pretty
wrote
funny.
a story around that called The Gordian Knot. And it's what if the knot were actually this subterranean Lovecraftian entity that Alexander had to survive and defeat before he could become the world emperor. I love doing stuff like that. I got some stories where Simon Magus is the hero and so forth.
Yeah, I think they damned his image. I think he was way more popular in the first century. And then second century Christians got a hold of him and made him into a demon. That's why I think Acts is like showing a sort of turning of the poles, where he's not evil in Acts. He's like kind of getting close. He's like greedy, but he gets saved. So he's, they're like, it's almost like at that point when Acts is being written, they still want to be nice to the Simon Magus crowd, but they don't want to like they don't want to give them any vindication either. That's what it feels like. They're toting the line a little bit.
I think Simon Magus was Paul, as Gustav Volkmar and F.C. Bauer thought, because what is he pictured as doing? He approaches Peter and says, wow, you lay on hands, and these people receive the Holy Spirit, and probably were speaking in tongues or something you could observe. And Peter says, keep your money. He says, I'll gladly pay you to tell me how to do this. And he said, keep your filthy money. You have no part in this matter or this endeavor. Like, poor Simon is just asking to join the apostolic ministry. He says, nothing doing. Well, Volkmar pointed out, doesn't this sound more than a little like this meeting in Galatians between Paul and the pillars, where they're willing to recognize his ministry if he coughs up the bucks? And it's two versions of the same thing. So I think you do have some rewriting in order to rehabilitate or vilify one of the rival apostles there.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, because Simon Magus, you get Simon Peter and Simon Magus. Like, there's something weird going on with Simon and Peter. One of them's the Rock, one of them's the Magus.
Yeah.
And there's some theories that originally was Magus, Simon the Great, which means Simon the Great as a title of Simon, and Simon Petros is also a title. It might be the same Simon. And then different traditions of this Simon went in two different directions, and then whoever wrote Acts weaves them together into one. To take the traditions of the Gnostics and demonize them and flip it on its head, and all of a sudden you have Simon Peter and Simon Magus.
Yes.
And by the way, Simon Peter or Simon Magus is Jewish. He's a Samaritan. And there's a tradition of him in the Mandaean tradition that he gets baptized by John the Baptist, like Jesus does. So there's something weird going on with Simon Magus. There was some sort of co-opting of the tradition of Simon Magus into Christianity.
I'm going to send you a copy, if I may, of a story I did called The False Apostle, that is my version of these old stories where Peter and Simon Magus have a public miracle contest.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Now,
they're both flying in the sky, and then Peter knocks. Yeah, it's so crazy.
Yeah, I'm going to send you that. You'll get a laugh out of it, I think.
Yeah, definitely send me that. Thank you for that. Super. Oh, I didn't read this one yet. Taliesin's map points out that the Shaivite sage Dahiki equals Moses, according to him, too, sacrificed his bones to become Indra's weapon that liberated the waters.
Wow.
I have his book over here somewhere. I might have brought it to the other room, but it's a really good book. Taliesin's map. I've had him on here before too. He's an author. Yeah, I don't know where I put it. It's over here somewhere. Oh, here it is. This book right here, Taliesin's Map.
Huh.
It's a comparative mythology, great work that I really like. I go back to it from time to time, like comparing Dionysus and Hades and Soma, the Soma god of the ancient Indians. How these Indo-European traditions have a lot of roots in common. Hephaestus and Dionysus, obviously that's in there. He's talking about these lunar cycle myths, Mitra and the cast, and, all that stuff. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff in here like that. You should. I'll send you a link to it.
Oh, great! Thanks, I appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks for that super chat. Solera Night is the last super chat of the night. Let there be in Genesis isn't creating nature. Let there be is just accepting nature as it is. I am that I am. That's a very interesting point. What do you think about that?
What would the point of the statement be? Leave it alone as good as it's good as it is. I mean, would it be a synonym for when he looked at it and called it good?
Yeah.
I never
Let's
thought
see.
of it that way.
Let's pull it up before we get out of here. Let's pull it up real quick. Might as well. One more little. Solera Knight's been dropping super chats, so I think we owe him one. Let's do this. So you have, the earth is formless and void. Darkness is over the deep, blah, 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 blah. And then it says, and then God said, let there be light. Kai egeneto phos. Let there, genetheto phos. Let there be light. So
Well, doesn't that mean let it emerge, let it be created? Ageneto?
Yeah. Yeah, let there be, like, let birth, or let there generate light. Let's generate light. I think that's how you would say it in a weird, like a more literal translation.
Yeah.
Generate light, I think you would just say.
Yeah.
Generate light. So
Turn on the lights.
yeah. And then it says right here, here's another one. And God said, let there be a vault. So yeah, they're definitely using some weird language going on here. Rakia, Batug. So yeah, something like that. Interesting. Thank you for that super chat. Any last thoughts, Dr. Robert Price, on what we discussed? Tie it all together for us.
Well, even if you don't go to Jung for his type of analysis, it seems to me that there is something not only mystifying but edifying about becoming conversant with all of these myths. They tell you something about human nature, not in overt lessons they teach, but also something about human dreams and creativity, like an inventor coming up with an idea for something. The old light bulb goes off and says, I bet we could connect this and that and have this great new thing. Well, it's the myths are projected dreams of a higher world or sacred origins that we can't verify. But like Bultmann said, all of these myths, all myths, are expressions of how those who believe in them see themselves in relation to the world. It's a kind of a narrated worldview, and that's what demythologizing is about. And that's worth doing with all myths of every culture, not just the biblical ones, which he was most interested in. So it's edifying to plunge into this stuff. It's not just curiosity, though that's noble in its own right, but I think it is kind of soul growing somehow.
Yeah. I think Jung was genius, by the way.
Whoa.
I think his work is amazing. He actually co-wrote a book with Kyle Karenyi. This one right here. Carl, my two favorite authors, both named Carl. They're both like
yeah.
German or Switzerland authors, but they wrote the Essays on the Science of Mythology.
Ooh.
And it gets into the triad of Persephone and the mother maiden crone ideas in here, maiden goddess, the divine child. It's all in here. It's called. It's actually it's got a subtitle: "The Myth of the Divine Child and the Mysteries of Eleusis" by Carl G. Jung and Carl Karenyi, printed by Princeton University Press. So this was the top of the line printing back in those days, in those early I would say 1950s, right? When this came out, something like that, 40s maybe. But yeah, it's worth reading. I think Carl Jung and Carl Karenyi are one of the best go-tos on evaluating the myths of without having to just bound to the physical archaeology and primary sources, but going deeper into like something that it takes someone like a psychologist to actually look at some of these things. And there's a different perspective from Jung that you don't get. So Carl Karenyi was a philologist. Jung was a psychologist. Them two together put together this nice little work right here. That's where everyone,
Wow.
So, anyways, this has been fun. Are you promoting? You want to promote anything? There's 1,000 people watching. You got anything coming out?
Yeah. Well, I have a recent book I mentioned, Houses of the Holy, where I go through the history, the origins, and the development of the beliefs of a dozen religions. Let's see, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Zoroastrianism, Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism, the Druze, the Mandeans, and a couple more in there somewhere. And I think it's really an unusual perspective, and it's got a lot of interesting stuff you'll never even find in other books on the subject. That is out already. And I have a few others coming out, one called The Heresy of Paraphrase, which is my attempt to write a kind of modern Targum of the four Gospels, an openly interpretive paraphrase. And I'm kind of proud of that one. And then there's one called I Said You Are Gods, which is about the sociological and psychological dimension of the principalities and powers idea. And it gets into the idea of territorial spirits in charismatic circles today. And then there's one coming out called Not Peace But a Sword, where I re-examine the idea that Jesus and the early Christians were pacifistic. I suggest what was a case to be made that they were not. And of course, I draw on major figures in that field, but add a few new elements. But then there's something I've been working on for decades, a 5-volume series collecting all of H.P. Lovecraft's fiction and some of his poetry. And they're divided according to the subgenres, his Cthulhu mythos fiction, his revisions, his poetry, his Dunsanian work, if that means anything to anybody. And the whole thing is called the Lovecraft Pentateuch. And there are 5 volumes of it with extensive interpretive notes and essays by me interspersed. I actually wrote the first version of that nearly 30 years ago, but it kept getting accepted and then dumped by publishers for some reason. And I'm very proud of it. So that's the first volume is about to come out. I have another horror story collection called Tales of the Derleth Mythos, which is stories based on August Derleth's variation on Lovecraft's mythology. And there's another issue of another anthology of flashing swords that Lynn Carter began decades ago, sword and sorcery stuff. That's in the works now. And all of these things should be coming out within a year. And I'm pretty sure there's other stuff. But my wife, Carol, and I are involved in a film series that we call public discourse through film in our little town of Selma. If anybody is nearby, it's like the last Friday of the month, and just all sorts of fascinating things. We're working on our own YouTube channel and so forth. So a lot of things are going on around here. Too much, in fact.
Yeah, once you get that channel up, I'll be able to promote it here and show people the link so they can go over there. Also, you guys can click on the link. I put the link to your mindvendor.com in it's pinned to the chat. It's also in the description. You can click on it. You can support a Patreon, or you can do a one-time donation.
Thank you. I sure appreciate that.
And there was one more last second question. When are you having Talieson's map on, by the way? And that is, we are talking about that right now. We were discussing that. So pretty soon, probably the next week or so.
Sounds good.
Yeah. And so that sounds about it for me. You have just attained true gnosis. Oops, I didn't have the outro ready. Oh, here we go. Where is it? There you go.
You have just attained true gnosis. The demiurge has no